You'll be happier here, Dad. They'll take good care of you. That's what my daughter, Laura, said as she stood by the open door of the nursing home, pretending to smile. Her voice had that practiced tone. Polite for the staff, but cold for me. My name is Thomas Grayson, 75 years old, from Portland, Oregon. And that voice, the one I used to wake up to every morning when she was little, now sounded like a closing door. I looked around the entrance. White walls, polished floors, a smell of disinfectant mixed with lavender. A place that tried too hard to feel like home. I forced a small laugh. You make it sound like a resort. She avoided my eyes. It's just temporary. You'll have nurses, meals, and people your age to talk to. It'll be better than you being alone in that old house. Alone. That word stuck to me. I'd built that house with my own hands. The same way I'd built a life for her after her mother, Eleanor, passed. Every nail, every board had a memory. But now she spoke as if it were a burden. Laura, I said softly, I can still take care of myself. She sighed, shifting her purse higher on her shoulder. Dad, please, don't make this harder. I'm busy enough as it is. Busy? She always was. Too busy to visit, too busy to call, too busy to remember that once she was my entire world. A nurse approached us, cheerful, efficient. Mr. Grayson, welcome. We've got your room ready. It's just down the hall with a view of the garden. Laura smiled at her like she'd just done a great deed. See? Perfect. Then she turned back to me. I'll check in on you later this week. Later that week? Not tomorrow. Not tonight. I nodded. All right. My voice cracked, but I covered it with a cough. She gave me a quick hug, light as a handshake. Then she left. I stood in the doorway, watching her car pull away. The red taillights disappeared around the corner, leaving nothing but the echo of the gravel crunching under her tires. The nurse gestured kindly. Shall we, Mr. Grayson? I followed her inside, suitcase rolling behind me. As we passed through the entrance gate, something caught my eye. A small brass plate attached to the iron bars. It was half polished, weathered by years of rain. The engraving was faded, but I could still make out the initials. E.G. Foundation, E.G. I stopped walking for a moment. My wife's initials, Eleanor Grayson. The nurse turned, noticing my stare. Oh, that's the founder's mark. This place was built by a family here in Portland years ago. Lovely story, actually. The husband wanted to honor his late wife by creating a home for seniors. My throat tightened. I smiled faintly. Is that so? She nodded. Yes, it's called Eleanor Grayson Senior Living. You'll see her picture in the main hall. She walked on, unaware of what she'd just said. I followed quietly, my steps slower now. Every wall I passed, every light that flickered above me, suddenly carried the weight of a secret I'd kept buried for years. Because the truth was, this wasn't just any nursing home. It was mine. And my daughter had just sent me to live in the house her mother and I built for people who had no one left. Silence filled the hallway like a second heartbeat. When the nurse opened the door to my new room, I noticed the lock on the window first. It was small and discreet, but it caught the light in a way that made it hard to ignore. This will be your space, Mr. Grayson, she said cheerfully. You've got a great view of the garden. Dinner's at 6, and there's a game night tonight if you feel up to it. I nodded, pretending to listen. But my mind was elsewhere. The walls were spotless, painted a soft beige that tried to imitate warmth. There was a single bed, a small dresser, and a chair by the window, just enough to exist, not enough to live. When she left, the silence pressed in. I sat on the bed, running my hand over the blanket. It was coarse, unfamiliar. Everything here felt borrowed. I looked out the window. The garden below was neatly trimmed, with walking paths looping around a fountain. A few residents sat outside, their heads bent like wilted flowers. I wondered if they once had daughters too. Daughters who said they loved them while slowly erasing them from their lives. The window didn't open all the way. I tried it anyway, pushing gently until the latch stopped me halfway. That was enough to feel the air, sharp and clean, but distant. I sat there for a long time, staring at the garden, until a nurse knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Grayson, would you like to meet some of the others? There's a chess club downstairs." I smiled faintly. "Maybe later." She nodded politely and left. When I was alone again, I took out the only thing I'd brought that mattered. A small photograph of Eleanor and Laura from years ago. It was taken on the porch of the house I built. The same one Laura called old and too quiet now. Eleanor's hand rested on my shoulder, and Laura's hair glowed in the sunlight. I whispered to the picture, "She doesn't remember how hard you worked to build this place, Ellie, or how you made me promise to keep it in our name." The room felt smaller after that. That night, I sat by the window, the dim lamplight reflecting off the glass. Across the courtyard, I noticed the sign over the entrance gate, glowing faintly under a street light. Eleanor Grayson Foundation. The letters were still there, worn but proud. No one here seemed to notice them anymore. Not the nurses, not the residents, not even my daughter, who had walked right past her mother's name without a second glance. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the ache in my chest spread like an old bruise. "Maybe it's better this way," I murmured. "Maybe she doesn't need to know yet." But even as I said it, I knew the truth was only sleeping, waiting for the right moment to wake. The room held its breath. The next morning, I woke to the sound of soft humming in the hallway. A nurse pushing a cart of breakfast trays. The air smelled faintly of coffee and oatmeal. I sat up slowly, joints stiff, and looked at the picture of Eleanor on the bedside table. For a moment, I thought I heard her voice again. "Promise me, Thomas. Promise you'll keep our name alive, even if she forgets." I had made that promise 30 years ago, and I kept it. When Eleanor died, I didn't know what to do with the savings we'd built from our small contracting business. She had always cared about people, about dignity, especially for the elderly. So, in her name, I created the Eleanor Grayson Foundation. It wasn't much at first, just a few grants, some donations, one small home for seniors. But it grew, quietly, steadily, and I made sure Laura never knew. At the time, she was in college, chasing her own life. She said things like, "Dad, I don't want to live in the past," or, "You should move on, stop clinging to Mom's memory." She didn't understand that remembering Eleanor wasn't holding on. It was surviving. Years passed. I let her believe I was just an ordinary retired builder living off his pension. She never asked how I afforded her tuition, or her first car, or the down payment for her house. She just assumed I'd managed somehow. But I remember the day I signed the papers. The day I put my name under Eleanor's on the foundation deed. My hand trembled, not because of age, but because I knew I was sealing a part of myself in it. I wanted her legacy to outlive us both. That thought carried me through as I adjusted to life in the nursing home. I played cards with a man named Harold, listened to a woman named Margaret talk about her grandchildren, and smiled when they asked what I used to do. "I built homes," I said simply. It wasn't a lie. But one afternoon, as I walked through the lobby, I stopped in front of a wall of framed photographs. They were labeled founders and patrons. I knew what I would see before I even looked. There she was, Eleanor, in her favorite blue dress, smiling beside a man whose face had faded in the print. My face. The plaque below read, "In memory of Eleanor Grayson, whose compassion built this home." There was no mention of me. Not anymore. The years had washed it away. I stood there, staring, until Margaret shuffled up beside me. "You knew her, didn't you?" she asked quietly. I hesitated. Then I nodded. "Yes, I did." She smiled kindly. "Then you're lucky. She must have been a wonderful woman." "She was," I whispered. "She still is." I turned to leave, but something caught my eye near the bottom corner of the display. A brass frame with a list of current trustees. I leaned closer and saw my own name there. Thomas E. Grayson, founder and trustee. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. They hadn't erased me completely, just hidden me. That night, back in my room, I opened the small drawer beside my bed and took out the old envelope I'd carried for years. Inside was a copy of the Foundation's charter, signed by Eleanor, witnessed by me. The ink was faded, but her handwriting was clear. I traced her name with my thumb, whispering to her like she was still listening. "She doesn't know, Ellie." "Not yet. But someday she will." Outside, the wind rattled the window lock softly. The truth was still here. It just wasn't ready to speak. It was a Saturday afternoon when Laura finally visited. 2 weeks had passed since she left me there. I heard her voice before I saw her. Bright, rehearsed, echoing through the hallway like someone performing for an audience. "Hi, Dad. How are they treating you?" She stepped into my room with a paper bag of fruit and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her perfume filled the air, sharp and unfamiliar. I stood from the chair by the window and nodded. "They're kind here. The food's better than I expected." "That's great," she said quickly, looking around. "I'm glad you're comfortable. I told you this was a good idea." I wanted to tell her comfort wasn't the same as peace. But instead I said, "It's quiet, that's for sure." She placed the bag on the dresser and started talking about work, how busy she'd been, how her company was expanding, how her social life was full of networking events. I listened, smiling when appropriate. That's what parents do, even when every word reminds them how far they've drifted from their child. After a while, she walked to the window. "Nice view," she said. "Better than your old place, huh?" My old place. The house I built. The one where she took her first steps, where Eleanor's laughter once filled every corner. I took a slow breath. "It's different," I said simply. She turned back to me, folding her arms. "You're not still upset about moving, are you? You needed help, Dad. I did what was best for you." Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was defensive, the voice of someone who needed to believe their decision was right. I smiled faintly. "You always did think you knew best?" She frowned, but didn't reply. For a few moments, silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. Then the door opened, and Margaret, one of the residents, peeked in. "Sorry to interrupt, Tom. Just wanted to remind you. They're polishing the Founder's Gate today. Thought you'd like to see it." Laura raised an eyebrow. "Founder's Gate?" Margaret nodded. "It's the big iron gate out front, the one with the old brass plate. They're restoring it. The name's so beautiful. Eleanor Grayson Foundation. I always thought it sounded like something out of a story." Laura smiled politely. "That's a nice coincidence. Same last name as ours." Margaret looked at me, a knowing glint in her eyes. "Quite a coincidence," she said softly, then left. Laura didn't notice the look. She was already scrolling through her phone. Anyway, I can't stay long. I've got a dinner tonight. I nodded again, keeping my expression calm. Of course. She glanced at me, maybe feeling a sliver of guilt. I'll come by next week. Maybe we can walk in the garden. That would be nice. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, but it felt like a formality. Take care, okay? I will, I said. As she left, I followed her to the doorway and watched her pass through the lobby. She didn't look back once. Outside, she walked right past the gate, the one her mother's name was carved into, without seeing it. When the car door slammed, I heard Margaret's voice again from down the hall. You're a patient man, Tom. I smiled faintly. I've had practice. She nodded. She'll figure it out one day. Maybe, I said. But maybe it's not about her figuring it out. Maybe it's about me remembering who I am. I turned back to the window, the setting sun lighting up the garden below. The brass plate on the gate shimmered faintly through the glass. Silence filled the room again. Calm this time, not empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. The moonlight fell across the room like a quiet visitor, touching the small drawer beside my bed. That's where I'd hidden the envelope. I opened it carefully, the paper thin and yellowed. Inside was a letter from David, my old lawyer. It wasn't long, just a formal confirmation that the Eleanor Grayson Foundation's board renewal was complete, and that I remained the founder and trustee. I'd received one every few years, but this one felt different. Maybe because it came while I was sitting in the very place Eleanor and I had built. Maybe because Laura had no idea. I folded it back slowly, running a hand across the front. My name sat beside Eleanor's in small, neat print. Seeing it there always steadied me, proof that I'd done something meaningful, even if no one remembered. The next morning, I found Margaret sitting in the garden, knitting with patient hands. She looked up as I passed. Couldn't sleep either, huh? Not much reason to, I said. She smiled softly. That's how I felt when my son stopped visiting. Took me a long time to realize peace doesn't come from people coming back. It comes from you forgiving them before they even ask. I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet. Later that day, a nurse handed me a small envelope. Mail for you, Mr. Grayson. From your lawyer. I thanked her and waited until I was alone to open it. Inside was a typed invitation. The foundation was hosting its annual Founders Dedication ceremony next month. The board wanted to honor the original donors and display the restored nameplate at the front gate. The letter ended with one line that made my chest tighten. We hope you'll attend and say a few words as the founder. I leaned back in my chair, reading that line again and again. Founder. A word Laura had never called me. That evening, when she called, her voice hurried as always. I listened to her talk about her plans, her clients, her endless meetings. She didn't ask how I was. Before she hung up, she said, Dad, you sound tired. Don't overthink things. Just enjoy yourself there, okay? I'll try, I said quietly. After the call, I sat by the window, holding both envelopes in my hands, hers from the day she sent me here and mine from today. The first one carried heartbreak, the second, legacy. Outside, a caretaker was polishing the brass plate on the front gate again. Even from this distance, I could see it catching the last light of evening. Soon, everyone would see the name. And maybe then, Laura would finally understand where she had sent me, and whose gate she had walked through that day. The room fell still. The only sound was the faint hum of the garden lights outside. The announcement came on a bright, quiet morning. The staff were busy decorating the lobby. Flowers on tables, banners hanging from the ceiling, people bustling with nervous energy. A nurse knocked on my door. "Mr. Grayson, the ceremony's today. You'll want to get dressed. The board requested your presence." I smiled faintly. "I suppose I can manage that." By noon, the residents had gathered in the main hall. A few local donors and community members were there too. The air felt different, charged, expectant. I sat near the back, unnoticed, as a young woman in a navy suit stepped up to the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone. Today we celebrate the legacy of a remarkable couple, the visionaries behind this home, the Eleanor Grayson Foundation." My hands tightened around the arms of my chair. Across the room, I spotted Laura. She must have come out of curiosity, maybe pride, maybe guilt. She was standing with one of the board members, smiling politely, completely unaware. The speaker continued. "This facility was founded decades ago by Thomas and Eleanor Grayson, whose generosity continues to shelter hundreds of seniors every year. Their names are engraved at the front gate, which will be rededicated today." A hush fell over the crowd. Laura's smile faltered. She turned sharply, scanning the room. When her eyes found me, her expression froze. Confusion first, then disbelief. "Dad," she whispered under her breath, though I was too far to hear it. The speaker gestured toward the glass doors, where two caretakers pulled away a white cloth, revealing the restored plaque. The sunlight struck it just right. Thomas and Eleanor Grayson Foundation gasps rippled through the room. Cameras clicked. Someone started clapping. I didn't move. I just sat there, watching Laura's face as the truth settled in. She walked toward me slowly, her heels echoing on the polished floor. Her voice trembled when she reached me. You built this place?" I looked up at her, calm, almost tired. "Your mother and I did, a long time ago." Her eyes darted toward the plaque again. "Why didn't you tell me?" I gave a small, weary smile. "Would it have changed where you sent me?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The crowd applauded as the ceremony continued, but in that corner of the room, it felt like time had stopped. For a moment, I thought she might sit beside me. Instead, she stepped back, hands trembling slightly, and whispered, "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said softly. "That's what hurts." The applause grew louder. I turned my gaze toward the plaque once more. The gold letters shone against the afternoon light, and for the first time in years, I felt Eleanor there. Not as a memory, but as a presence. I closed my eyes. The truth had spoken without me saying a word. The crowd thinned after the ceremony, voices fading into polite chatter and the soft clinking of cups. I stayed in my chair near the window, hands folded, watching the sunlight move across the floor. I heard her footsteps before I saw her. Slow, hesitant. "Dad," Laura said quietly, standing beside me. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the seat across from me. "Of course." She sat down, eyes red at the edges. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched like a tight string between us. Finally, she said, "I don't understand. Why would you never tell me? About this place, about Mom, about all of it?" I met her eyes. "Because it wasn't mine to brag about. Your mother built this in spirit long before I built it in stone." She looked down. "I thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "You were alone, and I didn't know how to help." I studied her face. For the first time in a long while, I saw not the confident woman who'd sent me away, but the little girl who used to hold my hand at funerals and whisper, "Don't let go, Daddy." "I know," I said gently, and I don't hate you for it. You did what you thought was best. Tears welled up in her eyes. But I hurt you. I put you here. I treated you like a burden. I didn't answer right away. I turned toward the window, watching the garden outside. You know, when your mother was sick, she used to tell me that love isn't measured by how much you give when it's easy. It's how you act when it's hard. Laura wiped her eyes. I didn't act with love, did I? I smiled faintly. Not that day. But you came back today. That counts for something. For a while, we sat there in silence. The air between us softened. Then she asked, "Why did you name it after her? You could have called it the Grayson Foundation." I chuckled softly. Because she was the heart of it. I was just the hands. And I wanted people to remember her kindness, not my pride. Laura looked down at her lap, twisting her fingers. You know, I walked past that gate a dozen times. I never even looked at it. I nodded. We tend to miss the things that matter most until they shine right in front of us. She took a deep breath. What do I do now? I studied her for a moment, then reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small brass key, worn smooth at the edges. I placed it in her palm. This unlocks the office where your mother kept her journals. Everything about the foundation is there. Her vision, her letters, her words. If you really want to make things right, start there. Her fingers closed around the key, trembling. I don't deserve this. Maybe not yet, I said softly. But you can earn it. She nodded slowly, her tears falling onto her hands. I'll try, Dad. I promise. Good, I whispered. That's all I ever wanted to hear. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, brushing against the plaque on the gate. The gold letters caught the last light of day. Thomas and Eleanor Grayson Foundation. Laura stood, looking out the window with me. For the first time in years, we watched the same view together. The room exhaled. When Laura left that afternoon, the sky was already starting to dim. I stayed by the window, watching her car pull away, taillights glowing faintly through the fence. The brass plaque on the gate shimmered again, our names side by side. For the first time, it didn't feel like a secret anymore. I sat down in the chair where I always read before bed and let the silence settle. You learn to listen differently when you grow old. Silence becomes a kind of companion, one that doesn't judge, doesn't interrupt, just waits. I thought about the way Laura had held that key, the way her hands shook when I gave it to her. Maybe she finally understood what I had been trying to teach her all her life, that love isn't loud and legacy doesn't need to be spoken to exist. I looked at Eleanor's picture on the nightstand. She'll be all right, Ellie, I whispered. She just took a long way back home. The room dimmed as the sun disappeared completely. A nurse came in quietly to check on me, saw I was awake, and smiled. Beautiful ceremony today, Mr. Grayson. You must be proud. I am, I said softly, in more ways than one. After she left, I sat in the dark a little longer, listening to the faint hum of the hallway lights outside. You know, I used to think the hardest part of getting old was losing strength. But it's not. It's watching the people you love forget the stories that made them who they are, and deciding whether to remind them or to let them find their way on their own. I'm not angry anymore. Just tired. And grateful that the truth came out when it did. So now, I want to ask you something. You've heard my story. How my daughter sent me away without knowing she was sending me back to the very place her mother and I built from the ground up. You know what I gave her? What I kept hidden and what it cost me? Tell me. What should I do now? Should I forgive her and let the past rest, knowing she's trying to make things right? Should I tell her everything? Open the ledgers, show her the papers, and make her truly see who her father was? Or should I say nothing? Let her live with the mystery, and let time teach her the rest. Because no matter what she's done, I still love her.